Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Greetings of peace, ladies and gentlemen. I want to get straight into it. This is a response to some comments that were made on a video I made recently entitled Young Men Have Been Brainwashed, Call to Action, Work Hard, Get Strong, and Build a Family. I'll get straight into it. The essence of the video was talking about strength and masculinity, and I just want to respond to some of the comments and questions posed by one of the viewers. A few comments, they go on to say. Number one, what metrics are you talking about? Can you point me in towards the data? What I was talking about was about the problem with not taking responsibility, the broken homes that we live in, the modern world, the epidemic of divorce and broken families and fatherless homes, and how that puts one at a huge disadvantage. The stats are endless, but one I just pulled up straight away. You can look into it yourself. But the connection between youth crime, gang violence, depression, issues relating to education, future relationships, everything across the board are increased dramatically with fatherless homes. And that's why really my call to, in the last video, males, to be more masculine, to take more responsibility, to work hard, get strong and build families, I can't see as being anything but a positive message, but we'll get into some of that hopefully in a moment. So the first reference or source that I pulled up was a charity based in Birmingham. Say charity, it's a community interest company called ACT, Activating Creative Talent. And the first thing on there comes up, 10 consequences of a fatherless home, the impact on young children. And they posed the question, is there a connection between young people growing up in fatherless homes and young people involved with issues such as gangs and violence? The answer is absolutely yes. 76% of young men in prison in England and Wales had absent fathers. And it can obviously affect young girls as well. You're talking about prone to eating disorders, self-esteem issues, depression, maintaining flourishing relationships in the future. Then you're talking about the kind of self-fulfilling prophecy and the whirlwind of you didn't have a father, you didn't have a strong father, which means it's going to be harder for you to attract a mate who's going to be a strong father to your children, broken home after broken home, the developments of addiction, and likely to become more sexually active early on in life, which then can produce children outside of marriage, outside of wedlock, which then breeds into more single parent households, more fatherlessness, which, you know, the cycle continues. So, and they say potential consequences of a father deficient home include behavioral problems, poor academic performance, exploitation and abuse, whether that be sexual, physical or emotional, self-esteem issues, like we spoke about, youth crime and gang violence, young pregnancy and promiscuity, drug and alcohol abuse, mental health issues, and later life opportunities can become stress. Now, again, as we spoke in the last video, exceptions don't disprove the rule. Of course, people can go through a tremendous amount of pain and suffering and challenge and still come out the other side, quote unquote, successful. But we're talking about what is the best structure for society? What is the best way that we can give the most people, the largest number of people, the best opportunities moving forward? And so without going into too much specifics, that the metrics I'm talking about is that people without strong masculine role models and figures in their lives are worse off. Simple as that. And my wife said it herself. It's like, don't be fooled. Like, don't pretend that people don't want strong, competent leaders, people that are going to take them on a journey of prosperity. Who doesn't want that? Man or woman, we need leadership. We admire and look up to people who have high competence and intelligence and motivation and drive, and provide security and protection. It's a no-brainer. And how this relates to the Deen of Al-Islam, the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the haqq, the truth of the sacred law and the sacred reality of God and this world and the next, is that at least comparatively, and I took this from the 2011 consensus about Muslim households, you're talking about a significant number of families from a Muslim household. So I'll just read it out. Of approximately 750 Muslim households in the UK, this was in the 2011 consensus, 45% are married households. That are in that married household composition category. The equivalent proportion in the general population is 33%. The difference is a reflection of cultural and religious values as well as age demographics. So you're talking about, if you take the top line, you've got 33% of households that are married, and you have 45 in the Muslim community. And that's going to be higher in other religious communities, I'm sure, the Hindus and the Jews, etc. So you're talking about a 12% increase in married households in the Muslim community in this country, which means generally a secure, a more safe, a more stable environment for the children, the offspring. So I just think that that rigidity, that structure, that security to the Muslim household is something that, again, I can only speak for myself. What do I want to create in my family, within my moat? And can I talk to the people of the online community, share my own experience, and potentially we can learn from one another? The second question, your definition of masculinity is valid, but do you really think every man must have the same definition? I don't really mind what different people define things as. I think that masculinity, generally speaking, it's like we have a dictionary for definitions of words. It is what it is. And sometimes this is the issue, is that people don't like to accept the truth, maybe. We'll get onto it in a minute about really my intention is not to speak down to people. It's rather to open a stream of conversation, of dialogue. And one thing that I won't do is, certainly on my channel, in my home, communicating to my phone that's going to be broadcast to the wider world, is I'm not going to put myself in a corner. No, I'm not going to bring myself down. I, alhamdulillah, am a strong, confident, assertive individual, and I'm not going to bring myself down to uncertainty and unsureness and anxiety to meet the majority of the population who are dealing with a whole load of issues that I wish to help them with, but I do not personally suffer from. And so what people define terms as is their business, but the fact that my definition is valid is enough for me. I'm sorry you feel masculine energy isn't valued. It shouldn't feel that way. Everybody should feel valued. Getting into the feels here, it's not really that what I feel. I see this as just an obvious fact of the modern world. The way that, we'll get into that in a bit. Do you not think the ability to step up to the plate is due to hefty privilege, privately educated, high-achieving friends? Do you have confidence that not everybody has due to their upbringing? Therefore, speaking down to those who haven't got there yet doesn't seem effective if you actually want to help people. Fair comment, absolutely fair comment. Like we've spoken about with fatherless homes, and yes, if people, they say that, money doesn't make you happy, but a lack of money certainly will make you unhappy, because you've got to be stressing about things that, should be covered. Where you're going to eat, where you're going to sleep, your rent, your bills, your car, payments, debt. Obviously, those things are going to stress you out, make you feel unhappy. So if you come from a low socioeconomic family, certainly if it's a single parent one as well, then yes, those things do set you back. But the examples of people who have come from that in my immediate circle, who have embraced Islam, have become the very people that I'm talking about here. Strong father figures, the fathers that they never had. They've worked hard to provide for their children the things they never had. So I feel that Islam is the perfect antidote to the vibe you're getting at, that yes, some people are privately educated and have high achieving people around them, and some people aren't. And from a Islamic point of view, these are just individual tests from God. We don't, there's no There's no comparison. There's no joy in comparison. Comparison is the thief of joy, rather. And so it's really like, what is my situation and what can I do to best propel my life forward, rather than have this kind of unconscious resentment based on other people that have more or less than me. I don't think that's very helpful, and I can't change what people have been through or where they've come from. I can only give my best commentary on what I personally see. So it sounds to me, this is the fifth question here, that you're talking more about discipline and you've renamed it masculine. I say this because this message could easily apply to women who are struggling to look after themselves physically. I would recommend discipline for both males and females, and I think that getting in shape is a foundation to positive mental attitude and just like seizing the day and living a good life and increasing your chances of happiness and prosperity, obviously. So I do agree. I don't think that discipline and masculinity are the same. I think that there is a certain element of discipline required for a strong masculine identity. And I also think that discipline is beneficial for women as well. So I don't think we disagree too much there. The final question, before I get into some other stuff, because obviously the question posed, or rather the statement in the video is, young women have been brainwashed. And I really want to get into that now, because I'm aware many people don't watch past this part of the video. Then at the end of the video, I talk about me as the provider, the sole income for my family, for my wife and child. I talk about increasing my income. And the question here is why? Why can a woman not earn more or the same? I don't want to be dressed by my husband. I talked about how in Islam, the obligation upon the husband is to feed and house and clothe and etc. All these kind of things, the wife. I don't want to be solely reliant. Does this make my partner weak? So these are all unique to the questioner at hand. My issue is I'm not here to cast judgment on what other people do. People, alhamdulillah, we live in a free society. People can do as they please, but I have the right to say I don't necessarily think that is the best approach. And I can get that from my own experience, having, my grandparents, my parents, my own marriage, the people I associate with, all having the same system, and say that this is successful as far as my eyes can tell. And so this is part of, yes, women can earn the same or more as me, because I don't earn a particularly large amount. But in my household, not that it's anybody's business, but I'm more than happy to share and make it people's business, is the structure that we have in place in my household is that I am the sole provider. And that allows my wife to nurture and be there for our children. I mean, alongside fatherless households, a huge problem is a lack of contact between children and mothers. And this is why young women as well as men have been brainwashed, because it's been absolutely put on a pedestal for women to enter the workforce as if that's the most important thing they can possibly do. So what we've now got is women returning to work, pursuing a career and putting their children into nursery. And the decision that we've come to is that the best thing, certainly, and the psychology backs this up massively, that certainly for that first considered stage of development in psychoanalytics, Eric Erickson or whoever it is, that first year of development, what is a birth, infancy to 7 years old, the more contact with the mother, the better. And so if my wife was forced, if I had to farm her out and push her into the workforce, then we would lose the connection, the benefit of the mother-child bonding. So to us, that makes absolutely no sense. And we would rather sacrifice a small amount of money to harbour a prosperous development for our children and our family as a whole. So and then this is a big thing. Something I might put in the video title is about I don't want to be solely reliant. I don't want to be dressed by my husband. It's a great beauty to be supported by somebody. It takes a humility, and that's the beauty again in Islam of submission. A submission is in the modern context, certainly associated with a kind of like an authoritarian dictatorship. But when we submit to something, it is not like a straight away negative thing. So I guess that's just like different people, different vibes. Lakum deen nakum waliya deen. Like unto you your way of life, unto us our way. Like my wife literally laughs and says like, she says herself like, why would you not want a strong man who would provide for you? Why would I want to work? Depends what you want to do. If you have a passion and you want to dive head deep into this passion and bring benefit to society, then I tip my hat to any woman who wants to do that. But if we're talking generally speaking here about kind of like a 9 to 5 slave ship, like just working to pay the bills, what I would say is that I'm not here calling people weak or certain partners weak. I say in my household, in my tradition, what the expectation, the requirement is, the obligation is that the husband, the head of the household, of which my wife says perfectly that the wife is the neck. You can't have the head without the neck. They are really a beautiful coexistence that complement one another. But ultimately, there has to be a primus inter pares, a first among equals. Nothing is truly 50-50. When a decision has to be made and neither side can concede, one side must acquiesce to the other, of course. And so that's what I'm talking about. I guess in many ways, in Islam, you're talking about a 51-49. The male has the responsibility, the burden, to take that weight on his shoulders and make decisions and be the head, the driver of the ship, so to speak. And so again, if people don't want to do that, that's fine. But there's many problems that do come from that. So it doesn't make partners weak, but we have to ask ourselves, ladies, genuinely here, if you, depending on the job you're doing, if you're just working to pay bills, I think that in honor and respect of women, these things should be provided for them. The Islamic model says that if women work, they're allowed to work, but all of their money is theirs and they have no obligation to contribute to the necessities. In the same, we see that a woman, her worth, her value is so high that for her to pay rent and to buy food and to buy her own clothes is just absolutely bamboozling. It's like, no, if you want something, and I don't know if they're right there, my wife literally just bought a new pair of trainers. Dare I say the price? And she bought them, sent me a picture of them, and without hesitation, I said, then I'm going to reimburse you and give you that money back. You are not going to buy your own things because I want to look after you and protect you and provide for you in the same way you would have, again, from a strong masculine father figure, you'd feel that same energy. And so my wife laughs. This kind of like desire and running towards working is like, why would you want to do that? Each to their own, of course. So why have we been duped, right? The females. Now, this is now a genuine, deep issue at hand that I want to get into. But before I do that, I want to actually just mention the yin yang of the male female relation and why different, even though there's an equality, of course, between men and women, why there has been a different kind of responsibilities laid upon one another. So what you have really is the yin yang. The yin is obviously Chinese. In the Greek tradition, you have Dionysus, the Dionysus god, Dionysian. You have, this is what's typically associated with the feminine. You're talking about a dynamic, wild, chaotic, emotional energy. And then you have the Apollo, the other god. This is the yang energy. And in this, you have a more kind of a structured and stable, protective force. And that's the Apollonian side to the coin. And these things are very real because, I mean, take, for example, the yang, the masculine energy, is associated with the sun. And the female energy, the Dionysian, is associated with the moon. Now, if you just look at the lunar, the monthly chemical cycle of a woman, it perfectly fits into this. Also, there's a certain, associated also with the night, a certain coolness. With that, a kind of a cold and a coolness. You have this receptivity, this kind of relaxed nature, although an unconsciously dynamic and unpredictable unconsciousness. You still have this kind of smooth, calm, soft, cold nature, as opposed to the yang being something of the day, something of heat, something of activity. You have the active and the receptive natures. And again, just take the intercourse, for example. You have a penetrating and a receiving, a active and receptive force within these genders. And I mean, it even comes out based on more of the statistics at hand. A recent video by Abdul Hakim Murad at the Cambridge Muslim College, he says talks about the recent BBC report about mental health crisis in modern Britain, especially amongst young people 18 to 24, who this category are particularly hard hit. 26% of young men have diagnosed mental health disorders and 41% of the same demographic of young women. So even in that percentage, you've got a higher proportion of young women who have diagnosed mental health disorders as young men, but nonetheless, both categories are extremely high. You're talking over a quarter of young men and over a third, approaching a half of young women. And he goes on to say, what has happened to the call of liberations that we were promised? We have the gadgets, we have more rights than ever, we have more options and possibilities. We can reinvent ourselves in more radical and new ways. But happiness still seems to elude us. So this is the calling back to the traditional approach, an age of plenty and yet an age of melancholy. So he goes on to finish to say, and it is religion ultimately, which is the divine strategy to coax ourselves out of our selfish ways that obviously don't yield happiness and into a form of life that does. The engagement with the sacred is now more relevant and more up to date and more therapeutically essential than ever before. And so this is really what I have to say on the situation. A call to masculinity is a call to rebalance a disordered system, to reestablish, the Arabic term is mizan, a kind of a balance and order, which certainly in the West has fallen out of kilt. A robustness and a toughness to family structure and discipline of children. Now children seem to have, the hierarchy has completely flipped. So I guess I'll end it there. There's so much. Oh, no, I have an obligation to say one more thing, a few more things about the closing of the birth gap. So this is why women have been brainwashed. And this is not like some simply kind of clickbaity title. This is really important. The Birth Gap is a documentary that everybody should watch. And again, this is where the kind of the European versus the Islamic world just are night and day. Because if you go across the EU, I believe that the replacement birth rate, each woman is having on average 1.5 children, which is below replacement, which means the European population is diminishing. And if you take that to certain parts of the Islamic world, you're talking at least double that, well over replacement. And something that is really important, and this comes from a article, and there's so many out there, newsocialcovenant.co.uk. There is a strong case to be made for improved fertility education, both within school and beyond. Polling on infertility awareness produces alarming results. More respondents selected don't know than the right answer on how many couples infertility affects. And only a quarter of women knew that wanting to start a family, only a quarter of women knew that waiting to start a family until you're over 30 means those women will face a 50-50 chance of never having children at all. And the polling in the UK suggests that, in fact, the desire for people to have large families is not uncommon, and 92.4% of UK young women who were polled hope to become mothers one day. So you're talking about nearly The vast majority, 92.4% of young women want to have children, and they don't realize that if they wait until they're 30 and beyond, it's a 50-50 chance. And people now are realizing that they actually feel that they're being robbed of ultimately an internal drive to reproduce, to recreate. And the reason why I mention this is the strength of masculinity. When you have somebody who says, this is where we're going, this is what we're doing, we're getting married and we're having a family. And if that's what you want, you're on board. If you don't want that, then I'm finding somebody who does. And that's the big difference, I guess, between a partner, a boyfriend, somebody who's like, oh, does that make my partner weak? Well, the difference is that partner, you've entered a kind of a quasi emotional contract. You're together until it doesn't work out, and then you fall apart and you find somebody new. A marriage, there is a duty. There is a legal and moral obligation upon both parties. It's the kind of the trifecta, the top triangle, the agreement. The marriage is something separate to the two participants in it. So I have a legal, under the Sharia, under God's law, I have an obligation to provide for my wife. Now, when you don't have that, and it's 50-50, then things are a bit more, just to me, it seems a bit brittle. It seems a bit flippy-floppy. The stats are out as well that couples that live together before they get married are more likely to get divorced. Again, go back in the day, my grandparents, they got married before they moved in together. I got married before I moved in with my wife. You're talking about an old school, Victorian, dignified courtship, not engaging in fornication without a clear set of principles, a long-term vision, a plan together that you can aspire to. Without that, these relationships have the seeds of their own failure built inside them. So the birth gap is something really scary now, with so many people born, the millennial generation have now hit that. You're talking about 60, as it goes on here to say, 69% of young women believe waiting until the age 35 is not too late to start a family. And 61% of young women believe scientific advancement mean that women can have babies at almost any age up until menopause, which is typically 45 to 55. The problem is that it's not simply the biological clock that is on the agenda here. The issue also is that if you haven't found the right partner by the time you're 30, let's say you're 30 and you've been with somebody for some time, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and you kind of come to the realization this isn't going to be the mother or father of your children, that this isn't your be all and end all, you're kind of thinking, I can dip out here. Then now you're talking about starting over again. Now you're talking about, 31 is on the horizon. You haven't got your spouse. You haven't got children yet. And now it's going to take, how long is it going to take to find a suitable partner? It could quite easily take 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. Something doesn't work. You're now against the clock and you're 32, 33, 34. And so that's why it's 50-50. That women, once they get to 30 without children, aren't going to have children at all. It seems crazy that those are the stats, but the documentary is based on 8 years of research. Somebody who had no interest in this field, but when they came to this realization, they put all of their time and effort into it. Regardless of the reasons women give for not wanting children, more focus should be given to educating women about fertility. Only when in full possession of the facts can women make informed decisions about their fertility choices. So I would argue that we are being brainwashed because there's less children being born. The fertility rates are so low that in the majority, or rather a wide spread of European countries, we're below replacement rate. The institution of marriage is not taken with any seriousness, which means people move from one kind of boyfriend-girlfriendship, one monogamous fornication situation to another. The more partners that somebody has, I mean, this is the beauty of, chastity. There is a beauty in chastity. When you submit yourself to protect, you can basically, this is the whole thing, right, about sexual liberation. You can submit yourself to sexual liberation, or you can submit yourself to sexual modesty. you have to make decisions, you have to submit yourself one way or the other. So this is something so powerful that I think people aren't talking enough about. What is the best course of action? What would I want my daughters to do in the future? If I look at my own relationship with my wife, what is the best thing to do? The best thing to do is not listen to the mainstream narrative. At the end of the day, when you get to your old age, what are you going to care about? Being a CEO of a corporation, having earned a certain amount of money, having a certain car or a certain house, or is it having children and grandchildren around with you, spending time with those people, impacting them, sharing stories, information, being a positive impact on the future of humanity by having children. I think that this is why young women have been duped. It's the individualism of the modern world, that really what you're talking about with most relationships now is it's a cohabiting situation. It's not this kind of coming together as one. That's the big difference between a marriage and between fornicating, cohabitating individuals. So those are the main things I wanted to go over. To end the video, I wanted to go over something. I did a video recently, part 1 of Can Liberalism Tolerate Islam? It's Abdul Hakim Murad's book, Traveling Home, Essays on Islam in Europe. And at the relative beginning of that video, I did a little pop quiz, and I wanted to just give the answers to people now. I said, in what year did PG Tips, what year was it established? And the year was 1930. I said, who was the monarch of the United Kingdom that year? The answer is King George V. King George V, of course, is the grandfather to the late Queen, and therefore the great-grandfather to our current king. I then said, in that year, 1930, who was the Prime Minister of Great Britain? The answer, of course, is Ramsay MacDonald, who was the leader of the Labour Party. Something interesting, if we go to 1930, both George V and Ramsay MacDonald were both preceded and succeeded in their positions as the monarch and the prime minister by people of the same name. In George V's case, of course, he ascended to the throne in 1910 from his father, King Edward VII, the eldest son of Queen Victoria. And then, when he passed away, gave the throne to his son, the king who abdicated, of course, the late Queen's uncle and the brother of King George VI, King Edward VIII. So you have Edward VII, George V, Edward VIII, and you have Stanley Baldwin. Then you have Ramsay MacDonald, and Stanley Baldwin comes to become the Prime Minister again, succeeding Ramsay MacDonald as obviously the leader of the Conservative Party. Stanley Baldwin went to which notorious English boarding school? Can be the pop quiz question. The same as Sir Winston Churchill. So Winston Churchill and Stanley Baldwin, big up the Earl, went to which famous English boarding school? And the final question was, who was the great student of Aristotle? I said that you have Socrates. You're talking about the granddaddy of philosophy, his student being Plato, Plato's student being Aristotle, and Aristotle's student being the former king of Macedonia, Alexander the Great. Let's keep that. We don't want to be calling him Alexandria. He'll come and occupy our lands. I don't believe he ever lost a battle. I was speaking to my brother today and he mentioned something like that on the phone. So these are the main things I wanted to go over, is that it's beyond doubt that a broken home is not ideal. And in my own life, I'm looking to how can I establish and retain a solid, strong family unit. The first thing in order to do that is you need a woman who is willing to, in my opinion, and take it or leave it, but this, I've seen it, the evidence is, there's a plethora of evidence, anecdotal in my own life, and from the stats, the research, and the divine wisdom, that when you have a strong leader, a strong head of the household. You know, my wife said it. Why are women pretending they don't want to be led? We all want to be led. I'm the head of my household, but do I not want to be led in many aspects of my life? Of course. I'm not the apex of knowledge and understanding. In places where we sometimes lack, we need people who can be above to support us and guide us. I think there's been so much, and this is why masculinity isn't valued, is because all of the positive traits of masculinity have been augmented and warped, and what we focus on is the negative, is the kind of like, you know, the dark unconscious of the iceberg, where at the top, the light, the aspiration is one of security and strength and prosperity. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm pretty happy with that response. Hopefully my basic message has come across. Remember to be working hard, to humble yourself. Submission is a beautiful thing. Nothing wrong in following, nothing wrong in giving yourself to another human being and trusting in them. This is the beauty. I think when one hasn't, and I'll finish on this, my wife said this as well, that when somebody hasn't been raised or hasn't had in their life a strong masculine figure or role model, then that's something that they're often trying to imitate within themselves in their own life. But once somebody feels that aura, that essence, that vibe, what it allows one to do, my wife as an example, with her father, with now her husband, with people in her life, is it allows you to settle in. It allows you to, you know, the old school test of like, you know, you fall back and somebody catches you. Because of the quote unquote toxic masculinity, the history of abuse from the past, now there's a real issue with people letting go and trusting somebody to catch them when they fall. And that mistrust, which does come from a reasonable place, don't get me wrong, creates a lack of unity and a lack of working together, and a kind of a spiral, a pitfall of broken homes and poor behavior, and not the aspiration of our society that we truly want. So yeah, everybody out there, my recommendation, not that anybody asked for it, is to get married, to have children, to take responsibility, to work hard, to get strong. And yes, if you're, be in shape. If you're a woman, be in shape. But the physical body of the male predominantly is one of strength. And so, you know, women, yes, be in shape, be healthy, be slender, be, you know, fit. But no need to really, if you want to, do what you want. Again, we live in a free world, but no need to kind of get bulked up. Whereas there's a certain confidence in a woman that comes from a kind of a slender, fit, in shape, healthy body. And there's a certain confidence with a man that comes from a broad, expansive, strong body. And there's clear differences between the sexes. And it's kind of really bizarre, but yet interesting in the modern world that we have to make these distinctions so clear. So anybody who's watched the video thus far, certainly like the video and subscribe. If you've listened to me this far, then clearly I'm touching on topics that you find interesting. Make any comments below, obviously, please do. And until next time, big up your good selves.